Welcome to BT's headquarters, one round. I'm delighted to have you here this evening. My name is Jack Stenson. I was probably on an email or LinkedIn post or something you might have seen, but we're delighted to have it here today. Give you a bit of a background on Digital Irish, first of all. So the invitation officially came out through Digital Irish, which is a non-profit funded by the Irish government to shine a spotlight on Irish-led innovation around the world. But the purpose of it is to stimulate conversations and discussions in an industry. So it's not just about bringing Irish people together, it's about bringing an industry and like-minded people together to stimulate discussions, collaboration, and enable innovation in an industry. That's my hobby. My day job is I head up startup scouting for BT in Europe. And we're part of, take over this actually, that's good. We're part of a team called ICYMI. We're the new revenue sources, the new industries and market that BT want to move into. So health tech, drones, fintech are three big plays. In Manchester, we have a whole health tech team building virtual wards, remote patient monitoring. In drones, I'm leading an investment in the drone industry to make BT the network that will enable drones. So maybe not next year, but definitely by 2024, when we start seeing them around, give us a wave because they should be powered by the BT system. And ICYMI is we are creating startups, we're amplifying startups, and we're investing in startups. So typically, we do partnerships, and then where there's a strategic benefit for a deeper relationship, we might do an investment team as well. So we're not a typical VC. The CFO, whenever I say he's actually tells me I'm basically 75 pot cash because we're not VC. We don't want equity. What we want to do is build win-win relationships with startups and enable them to grow and new revenue sources for BT to grow the process. Of course, beyond businesses and startups, sustainability is it's a hot topic of the time. Sorry, pun not intended. Sustainability is becoming more and more important, and rightfully so. And it's hot on BBC's agenda. I have it here top of my head now. What we have from the team, we have Rosie here, who's in the sustainability team at BT. Just talk for a minute about what we're doing in that space.
Hi everyone and welcome to BT. I'm briefly going to take you through some of our highlights and focus points that we're focusing on here at BT. So firstly, we have a big one and a hot topic of net zero. So we've been working on our net zero targets since 1992 now, so quite a long time. We're also supporting our customers on their own net zero targets. A lot of our customers come to us asking us questions about how we can support them, what we're doing, and lots of other questions. We're also working on reporting and transparency on lots of different topics like net zero, like circularity, and on various other things too. And then our fourth hot topic is how we are inspiring others like Company Today and other companies. And finally, how we are closing the loop on circularity. So how we are making our products more circular and working with partners to really sort of push this forward in the market. So that's just a really brief and quick introduction to our journey here at BT.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Not to be the sound like a corporate guy, but BT set a target in 1992 to reduce their emissions by 80% by 2020 and achieve that by 2016. And as Rosie said, there's a lot of other things that we're working on. And we didn't want to put a spotlight on now because this isn't about BT. This is about the two ladies we'll introduce in a second, but I just wanted to demonstrate that BT wanted to host this event because it has passion for this topic, and it's not just the fact that I work here and also great digital knowledge. But if I can introduce Anne-Marie Tomczak here reading now. I first talked to Anne-Marie about this doing an event in October 2019, I think it was, and we have this grand idea for what we might do in 2020. It took us a while to get to this room, but the room was much nicer and the view was spectacular. So it worked out. So if I can please just welcome Anne-Marie Tomczak and Ciara Reardon.
Hello everyone. It's lovely to see you.
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming. Can you hear us all okay? So Ciara's going to be interviewing me for the next half hour, and then we'll hopefully take some questions from you if you have any. But before we start, you probably saw in the invite that Ciara, as in her role as a BBC journalist, has interviewed David Attenborough. So you're very well versed in interviewing the great and the good of the sustainability world. I can't promise to be as good as David Attenborough.
Well, yeah, I did, but I did it a few years ago. And I interviewed him about butterflies. I was asking him about butterfly counts, it's a strict brief. But I decided to ask him what he would be if he was an animal for a day, like serious journalist. And he said he'd be a sloth, because he just likes to sleep that all day and hang out in the tree. So it actually went viral. So if you see like a video of me interviewing David Attenborough, it went viral on BBC News. So that's my claim to fame.
So what animal would you be then?
It's going well.
What you prefer?
Animal, what animal would it be for a day? I'd probably be a lion. I think lions are pretty powerful and strong. What about
I would be an elephant because they're, very matriarchal and they're really clever. They do things like put mud on their bodies so they can create sunscreen and yeah.
sustaining?
And if we were in the jungle, you know who would win? The elephant.
I will ask you all that. I don't know.
Anyway.
Okay, so it's lovely to have you all here, and we will have Q&A after our conversation, so you can ask your questions as well. So, you probably read we both worked in BBC News, so that's how we know each other. BBC World News in London, and it's a privilege to work with you. You've now gone on to Mashable and then Vogue, and now you're a founder of Design Tracker. So can you just tell us all, like, how do you go from being a journalist, like in RT as well, to being a founder of a sustainable company, or that to me is a bit of a journey. So.
Yeah, I think handbrake turns or pivots have definitely been a consistent theme of my career. I'm a farmer's daughter from Longford, so I grew up in a very rural, quite idyllic setting, and became a journalist and worked in broadcast news media for about 12 years. So I think when you're working as a journalist, you see yourself as, it's quite a vocational profession. You see it as a really big part of your identity. And I definitely saw RTE as the pinnacle in Ireland, BBC, and, I had no real major plans to go off and work in Vogue or in Mashable or anywhere else for that matter. But life always presents like different opportunities. And I suppose when I reflect back on the career path that I have had, very fortunate to have worked in news media, in technology. Mashable, the offices are literally just 30 seconds away from here, and in fashion. But I suppose reflecting on that, the consistent theme through all of those things has been an interest in how, things like fashion or technology or news and current affairs, how they affect people. And really, it was like the passion to understand people and to get out there and meet people from all walks of life is what drove me to become a journalist. And similarly, with tech, I'm, more interested in how technology is affecting us and the world that we're in, and with fashion as well, not just fashion for fashion's sake, but actually how does it affect people? And I think there's a really interesting conversation happening now with fashion. We're becoming, I think, a lot more cognizant about the different dynamics at play beyond the clothes themselves, that there is a whole supply chain there of people and resources, and from the land, soil, and different processes that impact the clothing that we're all wearing, and so it's that kind of thing that really interests me. And I guess how do you go then from being someone working, heading up digital for British Vogue, working with Edward Enninful, who in my opinion is one of the greatest fashion editors in the world. He's an amazing stylist who tells he tells stories through imagery in a way that's extremely powerful. And he's been doing a lot of really amazing things to diversify the pages of Vogue and to change the title or evolve it in a way that still respects its heritage. How do you go from working in this luxury fashion space to, flogging solar panels to people for their homes? I suppose working in Vogue really, although sustainability is something important to me, and working in the fashion industry, I think really reinforced and consolidated those views. And while I was at home during the pandemic, like all of you, you're likely to have been, sitting at home, working remotely during lockdown, like staring at the same four walls. I was thinking about how do I remove myself from fossil fuels in my home.
and how can I actually change my life here, in this place that's important to me. Our homes are really important to us. We care about them, and there's a consistency, with which we treat our homes. If they're the place where we can fully be ourselves, they're often an investment for us for our future. You feel comfortable in your own home. But when you're home, then actually, when you start asking yourself, does your home reflect your values, which I've been doing with my wardrobe, does my wardrobe reflect my values? Am I buying fast fashion anymore? And the answer to that question is hopefully no. I realize this is much harder to do than just throwing a lot of money at something and trying to fix your own home. Once you start looking at your home, you realize that it is the place where sustainability can start, and it's the place where you can actually tangibly have a really big impact on the world. And I started the process of looking into solar panels and trying to move away from fossil fuels in the home. And I found that the whole process was really truncated, really fragmented, a lot of research involved, just different parts of the market. There was a lot of different information and very time consuming and also very costly. And the more I looked at it, the more I thought there's no one who is out there proactively trying to help homeowners to decarbonize their lives. And it really blew my mind when I started researching the data around this. There's a statistic that we have on the Design Tracker website that between 24 and 26 million homes in the UK need to be retrofitted between now and 2050. And that's not the statistic. The statistic is unless they're retrofitted between now and 2050, we're just not going to get to net zero. We're just not going to meet our climate targets. So changes need to happen in the home if we're actually to stand any kind of a chance of meeting the targets that the government has set. So this needs to happen one way or the other, irrespective of whether I'm, part of that process.
And the governments have set these targets, but you're saying there's no one else really.
Well,
there's grants.
There's certainly a lot of different incentives that are coming on board now. We saw recently where there's a grant for heat pumps, for example, for £5,000. It doesn't cover the full cost of buying a heat pump. You're more likely to spend between £9,000 and £11,000 on that. There are lots of other incentives coming in, and this, for example, incentives around getting a green loan and at favourable interest rates, or being able to, if you use a Trustmark approved supplier, you can get a discount, a voucher through your bank. So there's lots of different little things that are going on. But in terms of making it frictionless for householders, it still feels very long-winded. And I suppose the goal with Design Tracker is to help you decarbonize your home, help you see the difference in looking at your home as a place that is not only good for you, but it's a place that can be good for the environment and good for society, because there's lots of societal benefits to keeping people out of fuel poverty, for example, living in healthy homes, good air quality. All of these things take people out of the health system. So there are lots. I won't get too vetted into detail, but I think there are lots of benefits. And I think the key thing we're trying to do with Design Tracker is bring this conversation around heat pumps and solar panels and insulation, which, let's be honest about it, a lot of this stuff is really boring. And not many founders who work in that space are willing to admit that, but a lot of it is very, very dry and technical. And so what we want to do is bring that into the same ecosystem as a lot of the fun stuff that you want to do with your home in terms of sustainable interiors and design. When you're going through a renovation job, you often want to get through a lot of the structural stuff just so you can get to the decorating part. And so they're part of the same ecosystem. So why shouldn't we talk about these things in the same conversation and in a more human and accessible way?
As a new founder of a business like this, how have you found the whole process?
I think every founder is going to say to you that everything takes way longer than you think and costs way more than you think. But the big thing I would say is, I suppose you start out on your journey with a set of intentions, and then there'll be a number of things that will change how you proceed. The market might change. For example, in the case of Design Tracker, we, 6 months ago when we first launched our stories platform, the war in Ukraine hadn't happened yet. That was just literally 6 weeks away from happening. And now we obviously have the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis. And so if I explain what I'm doing with Design Tracker now, people understand the value of what I'm doing because it's directly affecting them with their bills, their energy bills. And it's a shame that it often takes really bad news for, for us to sometimes recognize that these changes need to happen. And I'm not saying it's all on householders to do this either. Let's be clear, there's a lot of support that's needed for this transition to happen. But I think looking at the market, that's going to change. And also listening to your customer and listening, and the ideas you have at the beginning. While it's good to be simple-minded sometimes about your goals and getting there, I think you always need to really be agile and be willing to pivot. And I think most businesses, if they're honest, they have pivoted from what they originally started out as, and then they actually go into the market as. It's quite different.
And I suppose, people probably ask you, you're a female CEO founder, like, do you feel you get enough support as a new business leader as well?
I certainly think there are a lot of initiatives to support female or women founders. But if you look at the statistics, it is quite demoralizing to look at like what percentage of money is being invested in female founders in the investment space. Having said that, I do see that there is a big change happening, and it doesn't always happen overnight. And my own personal experience of being a founder, I call myself a founder as opposed to a female founder, is that other founders are incredibly generous with how they will guide you. They'll share all their learnings. I mean, we're going to hear from some brilliant startups as well, and I'm sure they can relate to that. I would not have moved the business where it's gone had it not been from having really candid conversations with other founders who'd already done this, and they were really honest about some of the things they learned along the way, the kind of do's and don'ts. It's, you're asking yourself a lot of questions around, should I be going for investment now? Should I just shoot for the stars and go for VC funding straight away, or should I go down the route of bootstrapping and then go for grant funding or angel investment? There's not one like model, one size fits all to like what makes a successful founder. But I think that being someone who listens, I've listened a lot to other founders' experience and then tried. This is, I think, the benefit of being someone who's 20 years into their career. I kind of know my own mind, and I've got a lot of other experience that I'm bringing in to this space, and I think there's this perception of founders of being the Forbes 30 under 30, and while that is amazing, it's really inspirational to see. I love seeing like 24-year-old just raise, £3 million. I love seeing that. But at the same time, I think there's room for like a wide spectrum of different founders to be bringing experience together. And actually, that also should reflect in the teams that you have. So actually, diversity in a team is not just about, gender or your ethnic background or, how you identify. It's also age. And I think that this is a big issue that we need to talk about in the workplace more generally. There's this idea that after a certain point in your life, you become obsolete or you no longer have something to contribute. And that just simply is not true. And if we bring people of different age groups together, I think there's some magic in that. There's such a magic in it. And I know that from working with people who are like a lot younger than me on Share Joy, for example, we've got, our team ranges, expands almost 30 years. And it's that dynamic that makes it work so well.
I agree. You've got people, older people leading organizations with so much knowledge. I mean, like the knowledge is gone.
Yeah.
And then organizations hyping up young people.
There's such an emphasis on youth, and while youth is precious, and the energy and enthusiasm and all of those things. It's not to say we're not saying negative about youth. It's actually just to say we could say something a bit more positive about more experienced people with more lived experience.
You mentioned Share Joy.
Yes.
So it brings joy into my face when you mention it, because I've been following it on social media and I was talking about it. So can you explain to everybody what Share Joy is? And this isn't a business, but you kind of ran it almost like a business.
Yeah, I guess so. Share Joy came about during the pandemic in 2020. I got a phone call from a dear friend of mine. Her name is Meg McMahon, and she and I met. It was in East London years ago. She was working in the banking sector, financial services, and I was in Nashville at the time. You go to these work dinners and then you meet people through them, and we became great friends. Both of us are farmers' daughters from rural Ireland. She's from County Clare and I'm from Longford, and then we remained great friends. But we were just having a catch up over lockdown, and she told me about very sad news about another childhood friend of hers whose daughter had died by suicide in the first few weeks of lockdown. And this lady's daughter, Marie Sullivan's daughter, Carmen, was 23 years old when she took her own life. And I've been doing a little bit of work into research on youth mental health and the pandemic and the impact that was having on, the whole demographic of people who were not able to go and socialize and see their friends, and what was the fallout of that. So I had a call with Marie and with Maeve. It was all over Zoom, but I distinctly remember it as it was in November 2020, and Marie proceeded to tell me all about her daughter Arwen. And the more I heard about her, the more I was like, she's vibrant, fashion loving, sustainability loving, yogi, and would love to have the opportunity to meet her. And just the sense of loss that Marie was going through, it's really hard to put words to it. And it was actually very humbling to have been privy to a conversation like that. So at the time I was working on a project around the circular economy. And when I say that, it means like just keeping things within the system with fashion. And looking at pre-loved fashion and what we could do to tackle sustainability in fashion, but also mental health. And I proposed this project to Marie around doing Share Joy. Would she like to do it in Ireland's memory? So we all put our heads together, our hearts, heads, minds, everything together. And I always say it's amazing what's possible when Irish women put their hearts and minds together, because like that was literally what this was. I was on Zoom in London and the other two women were over in Ireland. And actually to this day, I still haven't met Marie in person, even though we are super close, which shows that like the work landscape of how you build teams, it is still possible to forge very deep and meaningful relationships, even if it's all done virtually. And so what we did was we launched what is now known as Share Joy. And the idea is, we know of Marie Kondo, who is a very well-known Japanese author, who tells you to declutter your home and hold on to all the things that spark joy for you. But with us, we wanted people to look at their wardrobe, and if there was anything that they felt that gave them joy in their life, but they were ready to set sail on, a new chapter, to share it with somebody else. And there's a real positive psychology around sharing. And so the idea is to get people on board, really interesting women from lots of different sectors, to donate just one item, or if they want to donate more, they can give items from their wardrobe. Tell us a little bit of a story about it. There are often memories attached to our clothing, and I think the idea around that is to hopefully make people perceive the value of clothing in a different way. You might care about something a little bit more if you know the story about it. And then all of the money raised from those items of clothes go to our designated charity in Ireland. It's Pieta, who do a lot of amazing work around suicide prevention and suicide awareness. So it's almost like this juxtaposition of two very different things. Suicide is a really difficult topic to talk about, and even mental health. We talk about mental health and have all these paint squares with quotes on Instagram, but that doesn't really get into the nitty gritty of mental illness and, the kind of fundamentals of what that means for our lives when you're either, when you're either in mental ill health or you have someone close to you. How that really affects your life is hard to put into words a lot of the time. So it's a very joyful offering, but it's trying to do something joyful to tackle two really big issues: sustainability and fashion and mental.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such an amazing thing that you did. Did you, from all of that, did you use some of your learnings and then use it now and design that?
Absolutely. I think every project or experience you have, you learn from, and I learned a huge amount from putting together Share Joy, building the brand identity, the mission statement, the values, the kind of the overall vision. There was a lot of them that thinking of the team and the business model. Although with Share Joy in Ireland, we're structured as a non-profit, so we're very much a social enterprise. And our metrics of success are slightly different to what you might put in if you're a for-profit business. And also we were, I think you need to know the rules sometimes in order to break them. And I'm not preparing myself. I'm not preparing myself to Picasso for a second. But if you look at any of these artists, they often did all of the traditional, really beautiful and classic work first, and then they find their groove. And like the likes of Picasso, you see the classical stuff, and then moving into cubism and doing, I'm not for a second saying that, and just to make sure that analogy is not like applied to myself. But what I'm saying is the only way he could break the rules was by knowing the rules first. And I feel like I've done that a little bit with Share Joy, and also even with Design Tracker to an extent where you need to know, like in case of Share Joy, the digital publishing model I worked in, a very capitalist digital publishing model, all around audience growth and search engine optimization, and what does success look like? Grow, get a big audience and get lots of engagement. And in Share Joy, our metric of success is if you were literally like putting something out there that one person even finds useful, and that helps their day, then that is success for us, Or if it even just nudges someone in a different direction to think about their wardrobe in a slightly different way, that's success for us, and sometimes that kind of impact is hard to measure. I was at a talk earlier today at Wired Health, and there was a brilliant epidemiologist talking all about cities and urban life and how can we plan cities so that they're climate resilient, etc., etc. And one of the things she said actually about sustainability or about doing any projects that we think have a societally beneficial impact is that it's just well-meaning. If you go out and you do something that you think is good, but if it doesn't have any impact, then it doesn't move beyond being a well-meaning or well-intentioned activity. And I think this is a thing with anything in business. You need to measure and find ways of figuring out what is the impact of that. So for us, our impact Share Joy is we have obviously the metrics around our audience on social media and the kind of engagement and the conversations we're igniting. We can measure the fundraising that we're getting, and then actually the impact of that money that we've raised, we've been used to save people's lives. Like, it's amazing to think that by people selling clothes that they already have in their wardrobe, that, existing resources that are just sitting dormant, that are not going to go anywhere otherwise, because we have millions of pounds worth of clothing sitting dormant in our wardrobes. The average person has 7 items of clothing that they've never worn that are just not going to go anywhere. They might still have the tags on them. So it's just like tapping into an existing resource and then using that to monetize and support the third sector. And that impact is actually saving lives. It's providing counselling for people with suicidal ideation, or counselling for someone who's gone through a suicidal bereavement. So I think it's that idea of impact, and I think that's what we need to be thinking about when we're devising sustainability strategies. The measurement and the impact are the things that we need to be really focusing on.
While you're talking, Love Island have gone now down this route that they're going to wear second-hand clothes, and Shein got an awful rap about how much clothes were really cheap and really fast fashion.
Yeah.
Like, what's your take on that? Like, I mean, do you think like Love Island, they do it for one season and then they'll stop the next, or?
Oh, I wrote about this this week in the Irish Independent. I do a climate column for the Independent, and when I saw the news about Love Island, they changed their main sponsor from Misguided and another fast fashion brand to eBay, to a circular fashion platform. It caught me by surprise, and I thought this is really good news, and I think that the thing I noticed was also loads of other sustainability people were really excited about it. There isn't this idea that sustainability people are all like over here in like one holier than thou corner and not wanting everyone else to get on board. It's like if you get the mainstream platforms like Love Island or big fashion brands wanting to do something better, that's going to be welcomed with open arms. I suppose the real test then is once you scrutinize the activity and you look at whether or not there is either an impact or does it give you the full picture. And I think that's what you need to ask for any kind of climate initiative or green initiative. We see this also with energy companies. If you were to look at their websites, I think I've said this before, if you were to look at their websites of some of them with their wind power and solar power, you would think they were just angels, of clean energy, and looking at all they're investing in. But once you put that into context of what the wider investment is in that company and how much they're actually continuing to invest in fossil fuels, it's about having that full picture, I think. And the same applies, I suppose, with Love Island, but I'm really excited about it. I think you need to tap into mainstream culture, and into the zeitgeist. And it's nice to see a show like that is going to evolve. I think there are a lot of problematic aspects that we all know about with a show like Love Island. And we've seen the mental health side of it as well. And, you know, there's a lot of different elements there. But once someone leaves the villa, what are they going to do? Are they going to sign up with Boohoo and Pretty Little Thing? Or are they going to continue wearing Credo fashion? You know, that's kind of, I guess, where, and again, it's not just on the contestants because they're part of the system. I'm not absolving people for their own personal responsibility, but I'm saying that the system of fashion is what really fundamentally needs to change, not necessarily just the individuals who are, you know, promoting it.
And it seems that a lot has to change in fashion. We've seen it from the
Yes.
forefront. And I'd like to ask you more about fashion and also what industries are doing it well.
I think that it would be fair to say that when you're looking at sustainability, food is always an industry I think leads the way. And a lot of that's because we all need to eat, and you know it's a kind of a necessity in life. And there's some really exciting things happening in the food industry, and then some of these things will, I suppose, filter into other industries. I'm thinking specifically around, you know, plant-based alternatives to meat. There's a lot of really exciting innovation happening in that space. But equally, in fashion now, there's innovation happening around textiles, you know, mushroom leather, for example, or growing dyes for clothing in a lab, you know, so that they're not harmful to the environment. There's a lot of things about clothing that we're not aware are actually really harmful to the, you know, general ecosystem that we're in. You know, when you put your clothes in the washing machine, lots of microfibers will come out in the wash and chemicals. So, and it's not all on us to be reading the label. Like, you know, a lot of it is hard to make head or tail of it. So the system itself is what needs to change for there to be, I suppose, regulations and legislation involved in helping to move that along to a standard that it needs to get to. Without getting too technical, you could go down a massive rabbit hole on that.
Yeah. I might open it up to the audience to ask some questions. So let's bring up a question back.
One hand up here in the green.
You mentioned changing systems and changing regulation. What regulations exactly do you think are missing which can help web fashion or other industries within more sustainable direction? Because as you say, consumers only have so much knowledge and ability to push industries in a certain direction.
I would say the first one that comes to mind is around disclosure and transparency. So there are some companies that should make it part of their USP that they will disclose everything that they're doing, and they'll be hyper transparent and really honest about what they're doing well and what they're not. But if in the case of fashion, for example, if you look at there's a transparency index compiled every year by Fashion Revolution, which is a non-profit, and it's actually shocking to see the lack of disclosure and transparency within the fashion industry because they're not actually compelled to do that. So unless you're, you know, why would you reveal your, you know, how many skeletons are under the closet, or you might not even know what's going on under the hood because you're not measuring it. Why would you even do that, you know, to damage your brand if you don't have to? I think it's something like 94%. It's in the 90 percentile anyway of companies in the fashion transparency index who do not disclose. So the data that you're dealing with then is a very small proportion of the overall picture. And until you actually get regulated, you know, mandates to do this, there's no reason why companies would do that, because they might do themselves harm. But ultimately, once they start disclosing, it can open up a whole range of brilliant opportunities, because you can then see where do you need improvement to happen, you know, and where you can do your health check and then build a roadmap to get there. So I think that would be the first thing I would say.
It's true. It's like that organizations need to know. And with us, yeah.
You mentioned the challenge of retrofitting houses. I always think when, let's say, a farmer in Longford, what do you think the main blockers for the housing industry, or, you know, people at home to transition and retrofit? Is it like a cash point of view, like monetarily, is it time, or is it even like the knowledge side that people do?
It's literally all three of those things. That's hilarious that you should say that, because I've trying to build out a 3-step process to help people do this. It's firstly the knowledge, getting, you know, if you already have here in the UK, we do EPC ratings, and most people don't know that you can just punch your postcode in on .gov.uk and you can find out what your EPC is for your home, or anyone else's if you know their address. You know, you can see when the last EPC energy performance rating or certificate was carried out. and that will then tell you all of the recommendations on what needs to be done, or you can get an updated one. Then the finding the suppliers, it's really confusing. The infrastructure isn't fully in place just yet. It's something that's evolving. So there isn't like a whole army of retrofitters ready to like take on the 24 million homes right now. And there are initiatives happening to change that. So for example, Robert Gordon University in Scotland has just launched a postgraduate program to get people to train them up in retrofitting. But when you see universities who are, getting their intake to try and train people up how to do this, it shows that there's like a whole industry that needs to be built in order to tackle this challenge. And then you've also got obviously the cost, helping people do two things. One, assessing their finances and figuring out, what they can realistically afford and build a financial plan around that, helping them access the grant funding or the green loan schemes. But two, actually changing our perceptions about the value of what's worth spending on. We don't question spending money on certain things. Like now, people are willing to spend money on an electric vehicle and maybe get a loan out to do that. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. And so it's thinking about, $5 grand or 10 grand for solar panels in the battery pack, seeing that as a 10-year investment where you're going to reduce all of your energy bills because you'll be self-sufficient on clean energy, and seeing that as actually something worth spending on. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles to get people to see the value of that. And this is why I wanted to try and bring solar and other energy into the same space that we talk about beautiful design, because they're part of the same thing. Being sustainable doesn't mean that you want to forfeit quality or a nice quality of life. If anything, it should mean the opposite of that. So you've actually just hit the nail on it. You answered the question for yourself, and I just elaborated.
You were there.
Yeah. I suppose what we think about something like no industry benchmark as one is. And it's leading, but then smaller companies want to get the point across, but yeah, it's not clear what it actually means. And then we look at it. So
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. And I think there's a caution. There's a caution in the industry about either positioning yourself as sustainable because you're worried that you haven't got it all figured out. And the reality is no one has it all figured out. So this point about transparency still applies. I look at brands like Gani, and I think that in the last few years, Gani as a brand, I think is a really great case study to look at how they approach sustainability. A few years ago, and I think they still say this on their website, they say we don't identify as a sustainable brand, but we're trying to be the best version that we can be. But then when you start looking at all the really cool initiatives that they're rolling out and the partnerships with, textile innovators and Farfetch and other, they do amazing partnerships. They just brought in a circular model into their range as well. They'd be looking at rental and resale, so it's really fascinating because although they're saying we're not sustainable, we're not perfect, then they're doing all of this really exciting stuff. So I think they're a really good example. But there is definitely a problem in the fashion industry around what's called greenwashing, where claims are being made about how great these, clothes are, or they're vegan, organic. There are all of these terms that are used that it's very easy to bamboozle people into thinking, or plant-based. I look at the beauty industry and I see plant-based products, and there are a lot of plants out there that kill you. So, so the plant-based isn't necessarily always perfect. Poison ivy, or you think about so just because something's natural doesn't necessarily mean there isn't harm associated with it as well. And this is where I think there's so much room for new players to come in. There's room for startups to come in and build out certification processes, and hopefully then they be adopted by governments or regulators. I think one of the best standards out there is B Corp status, and the reason for that is because if you're a company and you get B Corp status, you apply for it, you have to go through a whole list of questions in order to meet the standards of what they ask you. And then if you get B Corp status, you're legally obliged, you put in a legally binding agreement into how you're going to run your business with that. So it goes into, I think the law and regulation, although these things can feel very far away when you're running your own day-to-day business, they're important parts of how we need to bring about real meaningful change.
Are some countries ahead of policy?
Oh, where do you begin? I think Ireland's actually, like, I always feel super proud when I see some of the things happening in Ireland. I think that in the fashion industry in Ireland, actually, through Share Joy, we've been doing a lot of work around promoting Irish design. And I'm really excited by a lot of the young designers coming out of Ireland because they have sustainable practices just baked into how they do things. It's not even seen as a nice to have. It's just comes to them organically, you know, no pun intended. It's just part of how they do things. They will use dead stock or leftover waste materials and bring this back into how they will be inclusive with the sizing. You know, there's lots of different things that they're doing that are, and they will also do made to order, so they're not overproducing clothing and then just having to waste a lot of the stock. So Ireland's a good example. This obviously Scandinavia is like the place where
They do everything well.
yeah, we can learn a lot. And I think a lot of this is I've been having a lot of really interesting conversations with other founders, other sustainable founders in different businesses. And actually there are two who I can think of recently that I just struck up conversation with. One was a founder who, she runs her own sustainable lifestyle hair salon, and I popped in to see her at the weekend, check out how they were running their business. And she was from New Zealand. And, you know, the way she's running her business was amazing. It was like completely different. They had a whole refillery where you can go and top up on all your shampoos and keep the bottle and then come back in. And they had a whole process around how they recycled all the tinfoil that was being used for hair color. And there were so many other elements. They used all of the clippings of hair on the ground to send off to a company to make brushes. It was just a very circular, very thought through process. She's originally from New Zealand. And one of the things she said struck me is that it's ingrained in their values right from, you know, when you're growing up in that country. It's seen as the norm. And so there's a lot of investment in the space in New Zealand around it. You know, the government invests in these things around recycling and so on. And the same, I think, applies to places like the Netherlands or Scandinavia. It's about the overall you know, system of how it's been set up and what you are exposed to from an early age. So I think that to me is probably the most anecdotal but meaningful kind of thing I could say to answer your question.
In simplest terms, if a startup or a company, and I know it's different sectors, but how can they be more sustainable?
Well, the first thing to say is that sustainable, like, it's never too late to start your sustainability journey. I think that the first step is actually opening up a willingness to measure, right? And to look at what you're doing and then to think, right, what can I actually realistically do? Because I think for a lot of businesses, they're just getting by. But there are a lot of things you can look at with sustainability, and this term ESG that's often used in space, your environmental impacts. So, you know, how much waste do you have? What kind of water are you using? What energy consumption you have? Like, there's different things around the environment, the impact. Measuring carbon emissions is something that, you know, a lot of businesses don't do. You can look at different tools that might be available. Not every business can hire a really pricey consultant to come in and shake it all up with them. So, but what I have found is there are actually a lot of really useful resources online. And myself, even as a founder, I've attended so many useful webinars, attended lectures virtually. You know, there's so many people out there who are sharing content on social media as well. So there's a lot of places to learn. But I think the starting point has to be just a willingness to learn and to change and to do things differently, and also to be willing to, over time, invest in it, because the cost of trying to do these things after actually will cost you a lot more than, you know, trying to do it now and plan for the future.
And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Ladies, thank you so much for such an inspirational talk. Definitely worth the 2.5 years it took us to get to the stage. Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's
Thank you.
just a great conversation. So
We go take a seat.
sure,
Yeah,
you want to take a
enjoy
seat?
the breakfast now.
I forgot to say at the start, you know, I never that we have 3 startups as well. for your awareness, for your collaboration, and your invitations to connect them to the opportunity. Right way, no, by the way. This evening, it's I'm very much connected to Anne-Marie and Kira. I know responsibility in choosing these startups, but very much I'm really glad that I think who we have today very much represents the businesses that we need in the world. Two focused on empowering people with data to make the right choices, and one Phil here in Ferris on enabling circular economy B2C approach. Glenda, who's first up, ladies first, was at our St. Patrick's Day event here on e-commerce. Phil actually used to work in beauty, which is it's not why he's here, but that's it. And Guaku represents Sustain.Life. And it's very interesting the kind of the circular nature of how he's ended up here, because Mike Hanrahan, who's the co-founder of Sustain.Life, previously spoke at a digital art event in New York in I think February, March 2019, and he founded Jet.com, which is a competitor to Amazon. Sold it to Walmart for, I don't know, $2-3 billion. What's the difference? And then was the CEO of AI at Walmart AI. You probably don't. But and we had Mike talking about a digital art event about the future of retail. And here is someone who is leading retail, founding businesses in retail, working in Walmart, one of the biggest retailer in the world, moving into sustainability. So I think that based on the conversation we had today and the strengths we have in the room, it shows the importance and the zeitgeist in space. So without further ado, we'll bring on like Glenda to the presentation on transport.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Jack. Thank you to Digital Ireland, and thank you to BT for inviting me. I actually, and you're going to be standing here wondering how I ended up here, because I've spent the last 28 years of my life working in telecoms for a competitor to BT, who I won't mention, out of politeness. But actually, over 28 years ago, I was at University in College Cork. I then moved to Belgium, because I had been working on public policy economics. That was my interest, particularly in the environment. And I did a postgraduate in what today would be called sustainability. It was a program designed by the Jean-Jacques Cousteau Foundation, which was really multidisciplinary. So it took sociologists, economists, oceanographers, biologists, and put us all in a room to work together on solving the planet's problems with climate change. That was 28 years ago. And I'm, like Anne-Marie and Kira, I'm Irish. I come from a family of 5 kids. There's 7 years between me and my youngest brother, and you'll probably wonder why I'm telling you this, but basically I couldn't afford to work for free. There were no jobs in sustainability when I left university, and definitely Shell and those companies were not really interested at the time in hiring me. So I came across Future Planet on the internet. I really loved their platform and thought it was really cool. So I reached out to one of the co-founders, and I ended up working for them because, first of all, I really believe it was always my purpose and mission in life to do this. It took me a long time to get there. And secondly, because it's a great learning experience. Both of them have qualifications in sustainability, and both of them are really experienced in their field. So basically, I think everyone in this room will agree. I'm sorry I have my notes because I'm 20 days on the job and this is the first time I have to do a presentation, so apologies. I think everyone will agree in the room that climate change is the biggest problem that this generation has to face. And I think sustainable growth is the biggest challenge that business leaders will have to face. And at Future Planet, we think of sustainable growth really as a business transformation problem. So it can't be really fixed by consultants who do a great job, Barry, and are really needed to help fix this problem and part of the problem. But what we think really will change the dynamic and make a difference is the technology. And that's where we and Sustain Life as well come into helping solve this problem.
So our mission of Future Planet is really, it's an AI SaaS-based platform, similar to Sustain Life, but I'll let you guys tell them about that later. But we focus on different things. So we're focused on the MNC market, and we're really focused not on carbon counting, but that's important, not on measuring, that is important, and not compliance, although our platform does do the two latter things. We don't do carbon accounting, but what we're focused on is helping businesses make their sustainability journey basically operational. And what's important for us is not just to measure, and Anne-Marie, I think, alluded to this, it's about measuring and improving. And that's really where we come at this problem. I hate slides that build, especially when you don't build them yourself. So anyway, so what we've done is we've taken, can I read my notes? Sorry. So basically what we've done is we've tried to simplify how the sustainability topic, because it's really complex, is dealt with in businesses. And we've devised a methodology which we call live, buy, and design, and we've mapped it to the way that businesses operate. So live better is really basically what happens within the four walls of your business. And it includes things that Anne-Marie and Kira mentioned, like D&I, like quality, inclusion, those type of topics as well. Then we have buy better, and this is about supply chain. And I think it's really interesting because companies can have 5 to 7 times the impact on sustainability and the environment by focusing on creating a sustainable supply chain. It really has an exponential knock-on effect. And the third area, and it was mentioned when we were speaking about fashion, is actually designing sustainability into your product from the outset and designing out waste. Now, this slide I really hate, and I'd love to get the founder to change it. And you're probably wondering why I'm showing it to you. So basically what we've done is we've taken our methodology and we've mapped it to what we believe are the 30 most important materiality issues that we think companies need to be addressing. And then down the side, we have people, planet, and prosperity. And on the bottom, you have the foundation of this. I think the gentleman in the back of the room mentioned it earlier, but there are a lot of agencies and governments and initiatives already pushing for change in the industry, and there are a lot of standards around. And all of that has to fit basically into this model. Now, why I'm showing you this is for 3 reasons. One, this slide is complicated, and if you're a salesperson, you're never going to present it in a room, and that's what I am. Secondly, I think what it shows you is that we need to take a much more holistic approach as businesses to the issue of sustainability. Most companies, and it's not their fault, they're going to focus on 1.4 and 1.5, okay? But how can you really have an impact and do environmental waste management and energy management and emissions well if you don't focus on things like circular economy and water management as well? And the other reason for showing you this slide is because poor Rosie has a really difficult job. And I think you will recognize most of the topics on here. It's very broad scope, and the challenge is really big. And there's also a talent shortage in the sustainability area right now as well. And then poor Rosie, when she's done all of this, still has to keep on top of the never-ending legislation and standards that are coming out. And so what we do is we take all of this, put it into the platform, and we kind of cut it up into pragmatic chunks that makes it easy for people to digest. I think I've lost half of you, but I am trying to keep on time. Okay, so how many of you in the room used Google Maps to get here tonight?
I work here, so I didn't, but I usually do.
Okay, how did you find it? Was it easy?
No.
Okay, so we have one user who wasn't that happy with the experience, but where we started out with was, as a premise, what if we could make a company's sustainability journey as easy as using Google Maps? So Google Maps, it tells you where You put in where you are, it tells you where you're going to go, it tells you the best way to get there. And what we've really done, and if you just remember one point to tell your colleagues at the coffee machine tomorrow morning, is that we believe we've created Google Maps for sustainability for MNCs. So what you do is you select your journey. So we have the 30 journeys. And then we do a maturity assessment. Now, for those of you in the business, you'll note that a maturity assessment in any one of the 30 materiality areas can take some consultants, not all, up to 6 weeks. On our platform, this can be condensed down into a few hours or a day. It's really incredible. Then once you've done your materiality assessment, we know what good looks like because we have the information on the platform. We have all of the benchmarks. We have the standards. We know what other companies in your industry are doing. So we're able to tell you how good you are. We're also able to give you some tips on what you might do to improve. And when I say might, what we're seeing as well is that some customers want to customize their journey. They want to take actions that maybe we haven't thought of. And maybe there's some actions that aren't going to be important for them. And then once you've done that, I love the way one of the co-founders goes, this part's magic. You press a button and there's a butterfly and it creates a smart transformation plan. And what I say is really cool about this, it has the actions. You can allocate the actions to collaborators within your team. If you're focused on supply chain, you can invite your suppliers to collaborate on the platform with you as well. And the best bit for Rosie is she doesn't need to worry about all of the metrics because it's already built in and it will turn that out for her. And then at the end of the day, and because we recognize that most companies in their journey are at the stage of reporting, well, measuring, reporting, do provide dashboards as well. But I'll say it again, what's really important for us as a company and in choosing the companies we will do business with is that we want to see not just measurement, but improvement in terms of positive impact for the environment. These are just some slides. I won't report because I'm over time, but basically these are from the platform and it just takes you through the different steps. Companies can join at any stage and also it provides evidence for reporting as well on the fact that you are putting plans in place. I'm nearly there, Jack. But don't just take it from me. So one of our first customers was in the construction news today so John Sist and Son is an Irish company. It's an MNC. It's 1.5 billion, so it's quite big. They are on track to be carbon neutral by 2030. And they were the first one on our platform. They've taken 3 journeys. So single-use plastics, circularity, and wastewater, which is really good. But we're also working with companies in the manufacturing space who are on our platform. And we're in discussions as well with banking and finance companies. So everything around green loan book, for example. And finally, as well, with tech startups as well, because tech startups are always looking for money. And now more than ever before, you need to prove your sustainability credentials to actually secure investment. And for Irish people in the audience, this is going to be corny, but just like that show on Friday night, there is a free demo for everyone in the audience if you want one. Just reach out to me after this and I'll be happy to do that for you next week. Thank you. And now over to you.
I have to say, I don't know if I could do an elevator pitch on my day 20. Oh, sorry, an elevator pitch, my job title on day 20. So well done, Ben. Thank you. So next we have Phil of Paris on the stage.
Right, hello everyone. As Jack said, it's great to be in the new building. They were talking about the new building before I left BT, so it's great to be in here. 2-3 years later, so nice view. Yeah. Right, so Ferris, every year in the UK, over 350,000 tons of useful clothing goes to landfill. And it's no wonder, and we all know this, but there's just too much to get rid of. Overconsumption is rife. Getting rid of stuff is time consuming and it's boring. We think giving stuff away should be fun and rewarding. So that's where we come in. Ferris is a zero waste app for giving and getting stuff for free. We exist to inspire consumers to reduce waste by making the circular economy fun and rewarding. We deploy some e-commerce best practice, data analytics, and gamification to make it super simple for people to give and get stuff for free. And it's a market that is really ripe at the moment. So 62% of millennials and Gen Zs are considering secondhand before they buy new, which is fantastic news. And that's resulted in some mega valuations in the market. So the likes of Vinted, Depop, Vestiaire Collective, all getting £1 billion valuations. And the likes of Olio in the food waste space and also in the non-food side of things, so the household items space, raising £43 million recently. And as Kira mentioned, Love Island's wearing of secondhand clothing. So it's getting that out there in the mainstream, which is fantastic news. So this is kind of our journey to date here. So we're a lot newer than all of the other startups. So we started back in January 21. We launched the app in April. Fast forward to November, we had 1,000 registered users, all sort of bootlegging along the way. So we decided then, let's raise some money and really turbocharge the growth and really see what potential of Ferris can be. So earlier this year, January and February, we raised £160,000 on Cedars, and then also won a grant with Imperial College London to join their climate change innovation accelerator. And now we're in a really exciting period. So we're at 6,000 registered users, about 1,000, actually well over 1,000 items now being offered on the platform. And that's everything from sofas to barbecues to clothing. We even had a caravan back in November on the app, completely randomly. So some really exciting and weird stuff going on the app. And what's really exciting here is that we've begun to deploy the capital from the fundraising, and our rate of growth from February to March went up fourfold, which is really exciting. And not only that, but our unit cost went down. So myself and Nick, my co-founder, are both in the digital marketing and loyalty space. So we've been using some of the tricks we picked up along the way to really drive that kind of engagement and drive adoption of the app, which is going to be super important for us going forward. So how does an app that gives away stuff for free make money? So there are two kind of levels to this. So on one level, you've got our B2C platform. So in the future, we'll be offering a premium service for those who want to be notified when great stuff goes on the app. So if you go on the app right now, you'll find designer sofas. There's a stand-up piano posted last week. There's all kinds of stuff. If you're there at the right time, you get great things. But if you don't want to pay, there will always be a free version. So people, if you log on there early in the morning or late at night, you're going to get some fantastic stuff for free. And those people will see advertising. So we've got two kind of levels to get a small clip of the ticket from our users. We're also very exciting, world exclusive here. We've just built out a B2B version of the app. So the idea is to offer employers, Rosie, so a closed loop solution, basically, whereby the employees can go in and adopt a community and give and get stuff in a totally exclusive environment. So it's a real opportunity for employers to build on their zero waste initiative. A lot of emphasis goes on the supply chain, but we think if large employers can rally behind their employees, they can really make a difference there as well. And also, importantly, improve the well-being of the employees, because everyone wants a tool to make a difference here, right? 84% of millennials are worried about climate change, right? Well, let's give them tools to make a difference. And we're actually in discussion with a top university in London to deploy there as well at the start of the year. So that's really, really exciting. And thank you. And that's it. I kept them short and sweet.
Thanks very much, Phil. Great to see that solution done. There's a lot of actions on Rosie. So I hope you didn't have plans for the 3-day week next week. So finally, for the evening, we have Bracken, who is coming up here to talk about sustainability. And then after that, we have, you probably get the trolleys rolling out in a minute. We have some canapes and further drinks being served outside where we'll start the evening. So yeah, last but not least, I'll show you cover.
So good evening, everybody here today. I'm sure everybody here cares about sustainability. So much that they're here today. I'm definitely one of those people. I'm actually an engineer on our team. So this was actually a volunteer opportunity to come here and do this. And no one available in London today to do this. So I came out here because I know you care about sustainability. I know you want to make a difference. So I'm here to help everybody here make a difference when leaving today. So what do we do at Sustainable Life? Oops, so we're a team of technology experts and we fight climate change by making it accessible to people every day. You don't need an expert, as Anne-Marie said earlier, consultants can be really, really expensive and really, really hard to find. We make it so that it's not so difficult and just with a few clicks, you can just get onto the platform and do what you need to do. There's a few information about our founders up there, which that was mentioned a bit earlier, which you can read, but I want to focus on how we can tackle sustainability. So the problem is sustainability is really, really hard. You don't know how or where to start. A lot of businesses don't know how to start measuring. Some businesses say it's too expensive because they're not sure where to go. But some businesses, for some reason, it's not a top priority. However, my generation definitely believes it's a top priority and we're going to tackle that. Too time consuming or C-level people not really listening. They're not really saying, oh, we're going to do something about it. And they're just, like in the fashion industry, putting it under the ground and leaving it for later. So there's a lot of other issues as well, which was talked about earlier. And we need to tackle these as soon as possible. So how do we do it? We make sustainability accessible for non-experts. So you don't need any experience to get on our platform. Today, you can go on our platform and in a few clicks, you'll get a better picture of what's going on. We provide a cost-effective management solution and we meet you wherever you are in your journey. So whether you're at the start, in the middle, at the end, we'll come in and we make it easy for you to just come onto our platform and do what you need to do. So there are 3 steps to make business decisions when the environment hand. We talked about these earlier. One is measure. So input day-to-day operation data into our custom calculators. We have a lot, and that is one I want to talk to you about events today that you can take into consideration. We have manage and report. Christoph is going to go into details about all the different measurements and decisions that businesses can take. So,
yeah, and then just expanding a little bit on those 3 things, we have measure as the first pillar, and this is really about recording all your operational metrics from your business and getting them into our data bank, which then translates them into a carbon footprint, right? So Rosie, Jack, we have this events calculator as just a practical example, right? How many folks turned up? What's the catering? A lot of more detail, and the application tells you the carbon footprint for it that you can then in a reporting ready fashion, in a transparent calculation conforming to various standards, and in detail explain how that number was arrived at, and ready for reporting framework. So after recording, the next step is manage, because obviously you can just go there, you get your metric tons, and you offset. And we do offer offsets with subscriptions and so forth, but that's not the purpose. Really, what we want to do is reduce. And so we have a comprehensive set of actions that give you a diverse and applicable to many different businesses and areas, and common denominator between facilities. Loads of actions that you can do to reduce your footprint over time, and track them in a project management fashion. So there's a project management component to this as well, and be really reflecting a complex picture of international, multi-location, large enterprises, including suppliers. So you might have a network of suppliers which you want to get insights into their into certain aspects of their carbon footprint. And then finally, report, because you need to report this internally up to your leadership, and externally to your customers, because that will help you as a business, and into the regulations. And many of you will be aware of recent SEC announcements. This will become a thing. We all know it's just a matter of time. And there are things that were mentioned before, as well, like CDP and other reporting frameworks, where then the data that you've collected is ready to flow into those reporting frameworks and ready for certifications like people. And there's quite a few really diverse companies that have adapted us already. So this is from manufacturing. Here we see a electric bike manufacturer, over the financial industry, all the way through consulting, supply chain management, beauty products. So yeah, and the size of the company is really we start in our offering. We have something from really small starting packages and free packages up to sort of mid-sized companies up into the thousands of employees companies, really. So
yes, so I'm not going to take you through the details of all of this. I know there's some food coming up soon, so everyone wants to get to that. But I do have an ask of everyone today in the audience. Everyone, I would like you to be sustainable in your lives as you continue to do so, but also like you to be sustainable in the businesses that you operate within. So if you could please take the solution to the business you operate with, play around with it, take a look at it, and see how you can help everyone get closer to net zero, sustained life. And that's it. Thank you.
So thanks, guys. A really great pitch there, and certainly I think if everyone could do me a favor, just make sure you finish off campaigns. That would really that would make the conversation like that. But thank you so much for coming this evening. It's been something that has been on the back of my mind for 2.5 years. Having Anne-Marie come in here and talk about a passion topic of hers, something that's important to me, but definitely a passion topic of hers. And certainly, I think from what I've heard this evening, there's a lot of hope in the world, which sees a lot of people and a lot of smart ideas and people delivering on them to enable that and make it a reality. Thank you for coming this evening. We'll be hosting more events here at BT. Digital Irish will be doing more events as well. Certainly, Denise is standing down the back. We might be doing a health tech and moderating a health tech focused one in September, October time, maybe after the holidays. And at BT, there's a few other topics such as smart cities and drones as well. We are going to be hosting sometime this year. And we'd love to welcome people back, so please stay in touch. We also, it's not just the Irish community here, we have someone from the Canadian government as well here this evening. And we look forward to hosting other delegations and other representatives and other communities in here to put a spotlight on the amazing innovation happening in London. And for the ability to fly in. Thanks. So thank you so much for coming this evening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening out there. Please enjoy the food and drink, and hopefully stay in touch.